I signed the last page of what I thought was a routine estate update and set down the pen. 61 years old. A company worth more than my grandfather ever dreamed of. And a wife I believed was the best decision I ever made. I was wrong about the last part. Completely and catastrophically wrong. The paralegal, a quiet young woman named Rachel, stepped out of the conference room to make copies. Our attorney, Gerald Marsh, followed her into the hallway, leaving the door open just enough. I was reaching for my water glass when I heard it. Make sure Diana gets the blue folder before James leaves, Gerald said, his voice low and deliberate. Not after. Before. And don't let him see what's inside. I set the glass down without drinking. My wife was in the lobby. I'd asked her to come because Gerald said it would be efficient to have both signatures on the same day. She'd agreed immediately. Too immediately. Now that I thought about it, I stayed very still in that leather chair and listened to the silence that followed. Rachel said something I couldn't catch. Gerald's voice dropped even lower. Then footsteps moved away from the door. I picked up my pen and pretended to review the pages already signed. My hands were steady. My chest was not. Before I left that office, I needed to know what was in that folder. Before I said a word to my wife of 26 years, I needed to understand what I had just heard. I had built Caldwell properties from a single commercial lot. My father left me in 1989. By the time I turned 60, we had projects running across 4 Texas counties, a portfolio valued at just over $19 million, and a reputation solid enough that people called us before they listed. I had earned every one of those gray hairs and every line on my face. My son Nathan had joined the company 3 years ago, fresh out of UT Austin's business program, full of ideas that were better than he realized. My wife Diana ran the marketing side, had for the past 12 years. We were a family business in the truest sense. That was the life I believed I had. Looking back, the changes had been gradual enough that I could explain each one away on its own. Diana started taking longer lunches. She joined a women's networking group that met on Thursday evenings and sometimes ran until 10. She bought a second phone. Said it was for her personal social stuff, so work emails wouldn't interrupt family time. I thought that was reasonable. I thought a lot of things were reasonable. The will update had been her idea. We were revising beneficiary structures following the company expansion. She said, Gerald had handled our legal work for 8 years. She trusted him completely. She told me that on a Tuesday morning over coffee. Gerald Marsh is the best in Dallas for this kind of restructuring. Don't use anyone else. She slid his card across the table. I remember looking at it and thinking how organized she was. How thoughtful. I told her to call and schedule it. In that conference room, hearing Gerald's voice through the gap in the door, I understood I had spent years mistaking a script for a life. I did not confront either of them. I asked Rachel for the restroom and spent 4 minutes in a single-occupancy bathroom with the door locked, breathing slowly and thinking clearly. When I came back to the lobby, Diana was smiling at her phone. She put it away when she saw me. All done, she said. Almost. I said, Gerald wants you in the conference room to initial 2 pages. Something about the property transfer clauses. She stood without hesitation. Of course. I watched her walk down that hallway and felt something close behind inside me. Whatever I thought we were, it was ending. I just didn't know the full shape of it yet. That night I called Ray Kowalski. Ray and I had been close since our early 30s, when he was working financial crimes for the FBI's Dallas field office, and I was building out my second commercial property. We'd been introduced through a mutual contact and discovered we both liked fishing, bad coffee, and telling the truth even when it was inconvenient. He retired from federal work 4 years ago and opened a private investigation firm on the north side of the city. If I needed someone I could trust completely, it was Ray. I told him everything in 20 minutes, sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a Home Depot. Engine running. Windows up. He didn't say much until I finished. Then he said, Gerald Marsh has been your attorney for how long? 8 years. And the will update was whose idea? Diana's. A long pause. Give me 72 hours. I went home and had dinner with my wife and pretended nothing had changed. Diana made pasta. Told me about a property she thought we should look at in Frisco. Asked how the signing went. I said smooth. No issues. She poured herself a second glass of wine and said she was glad everything was in order. I watched her face the entire time and saw nothing. That was the most unsettling part. There was nothing to see. 3 days later, Ray called at 7 in the morning. Come now. His office was on the second floor of a converted warehouse off Greenville Avenue. The kind of space that looked disorganized until you understood the system. When I arrived, papers covered every flat surface, and a whiteboard on the far wall had names connected by lines in blue marker. Sit down, he said. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being kind. Gerald Marsh had been a partner at his firm for 19 years. Well regarded. No public complaints. No disciplinary history with the Texas State Bar. But Ray's contacts ran deeper than public records. A former colleague in financial crimes had worked a case 2 years earlier, involving structured cash withdrawals from a client trust account. The case had been closed without charges due to lack of direct evidence. The attorney in question had been Gerald Marsh. Ray laid photographs on the table. Diana's car in the parking garage beneath Gerald's building. Monday at 1140 a.m. The same car on Wednesday at 2:15 p.m. Thursday evening at 7:00. He had been following her for 3 days. How long? I asked. At minimum, 2 years, based on what I can verify. Probably longer. I stared at the photos. My wife of 26 years walking into another man's building in the middle of a workday. I had been signing contracts, managing projects, building something real. While this was happening, tell me about the blue folder. I said. Ray opened a manila envelope and slid a document across the desk. He explained before I could ask. He had a contact at an insurance brokerage who owed him a favor. What the contact found had taken an extra day because the policy was structured unusually. 6 months earlier, a life insurance policy had been taken out in my name. Coverage amount of $4 million. Primary beneficiary, Diana Caldwell. The policy had been initiated through Gerald Marsh's firm. Classified as part of estate planning documentation, my signature appeared on the application. I looked at my signature. Then I looked at it again. That's not my handwriting, I said. Ray nodded slowly. I had a document examiner look at it this morning. Informal, not yet official. She says the signature shows inconsistencies in pen pressure and letter formation. She believes it was traced or copied. Someone had forged my signature on a $4 million life insurance policy. My attorney, my wife, both. Possibly a third person I didn't know yet. The room tilted slightly, and then steadied. I had learned something about myself in that moment. When the worst thing you can imagine becomes a fact, you don't collapse. You go cold and very focused. What was in the blue folder? I asked. A copy of the policy. Ray said. And a letter of instruction to a financial services company registered in Nevada. A company called Mesa Point Advisors, LLC. I've never heard of that. You wouldn't have. It was registered 14 months ago. Ray pulled up his laptop and turned the screen toward me. The registered agent for Mesa Point Advisors, LLC, was listed as D. Whitfield. Diana's maiden name was Whitfield. Your wife is the sole operating member. The silence in that office was complete. I had spent 26 years being a husband in good faith. Every anniversary. Every vacation. Every evening I came home to that house in Colleyville and sat across the dinner table from this woman. I had been giving her access to everything I built, and she had been building something else. There's more, Ray said. He pulled out bank statements. Over the past 4 years. Funds had moved from our joint operating account through what appeared to be vendor payments, landscaping services, marketing consultants, event management firms. Ray had checked 3 of them. None existed at the registered addresses. Total amount, routed through these payments, over 4 years, just under $380,000. Gerald's firm processed all of these as legitimate business expenses. Ray said, "He has cover documentation for everyone. Professional grade." The 2 of them had been building this infrastructure for years. Moving carefully. Never taking amounts large enough to trigger my attention in any single month. "What's the play?" I asked. "What are they waiting for?" Ray was quiet for a moment. "With a forged signature on a Ford a million policy, with that much money already positioned, and with your estate now restructured to channel your assets through Diana upon death." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I drove home that evening and cooked dinner for the first time in years. Grilled steaks. Diana's favorite. She seemed genuinely pleased. We talked about Nathan's idea to expand into a new district. She said he was showing real maturity. I agreed and watched her eyes and felt nothing except clarity. That night I lay awake and made a list of every decision Diana had influenced over the past 3 years. The life insurance conversation she'd initiated, the will revision, the referral to Gerald, the slow migration of company finances to consolidated accounts she had access to. Every item on that list had seemed reasonable at the time. Practical. The ordinary logistics of a shared life. I had been farmed. Methodically. Patiently. With affection used as the fence line. I gave Ray 10 more days. Then I made a decision that would either save everything or cost me my son. Nathan didn't know any of it yet. My son was 24, working 60-hour weeks, pouring himself into this company with a seriousness that reminded me of myself. At his age, his mother had been good to him growing up. Steady, present, the kind of parent who showed up for everything. He loved her the way you love someone you've never had reason to question. I knew that telling him was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done. I called him on a Thursday afternoon and asked him to meet me for dinner. Just the 2 of us. I laid everything out over 2 hours at a corner table in a quiet steakhouse near the office. The folder, the forged signature, the shell company, Ray's investigation, the photographs. Nathan didn't speak for a long time after I finished. He stared at the table. Then he looked up. "Mom would never do this," he said. "I know how it sounds. This is he stop. Dad. You're saying she's been planning to have you killed. I'm saying the structure is in place for that to be the logical next step. And I'm not going to wait to find out if I'm right." He shook his head. "She raised me. She was at every game, every graduation. You don't do that if you're running some kind of con. I'm not asking you to decide tonight." I said, "I'm asking you to hear me. I heard you." His voice had gone flat. "And I need to think." He left before dessert. I paid the check and sat alone for a while and accepted that I might lose my son before this was over. The following 9 days were the most careful of my life. Ray brought in a surveillance specialist and a technology expert. We had already identified that Gerald's firm had a rental property, a condominium in uptown Dallas, he used for what he described to colleagues as client meeting overflow. 3 visits from Diana in the past 10 days confirmed what it was actually used for. With the help of Ray's tech contact and a building maintenance supervisor who had his own reasons for cooperating, we placed audio recording equipment in that unit on a Wednesday evening. Everything fed to an encrypted receiver in Ray's vehicle. I also contacted a real attorney not one Diana had recommended, Margaret Ozai, a former federal prosecutor who now handled complex civil and criminal cases. I showed her everything Ray had assembled. She studied it for 2 hours without expression. Then she said, "If you get them on tape discussing the insurance policy or the estate plan, we can move." I also went to a document forensics firm and paid for a certified analysis of the life insurance signature. The report came back in 6 days. Conclusive, the signature was not consistent with my authenticated handwriting samples. Forgery confirmed. I had one more thing to do. I went back to the original estate documents Gerald had filed and noticed something I had not seen before. A clause added in the most recent revision that transferred operational control of Caldwell properties to Diana in the event of my incapacitation or death. I had not seen that language in the draft I reviewed. It had been added to the final version. My initials appeared beside it. I did not initial that clause. I had never seen it before. On a Friday evening in October, I told Diana I had a late meeting with a potential investor from Houston. She kissed my cheek and said not to stay out too late. I drove to Ray's van, parked 2 blocks from Gerald's uptown unit, and put on headphones. Diana arrived at 6:45. Gerald opened the door. They were easy with each other the way people are when they've been doing something for a very long time. They poured drinks and talked about a project she was interested in near the New Mexico border. Then Diana set down her glass and her voice changed. "James found something," she said. "He asked me about Mesa Point last week. Casual. But he never asks casual questions." My blood went cold. I had asked nothing about Mesa Point. I had been careful. Either she was guessing, or someone had told her I'd been asking questions. Gerald's voice was measured. "What did you tell him?" I said it was a consulting firm I was using for the Frisco project. He seemed to accept it. "Then we're fine." "We're not fine. Gerald. We need to move the timeline. A pause. Diana. 4 years. I have been patient for 4 years. The policy is in place. The estate is structured. Everything is ready. Every month we wait is another month. Something goes wrong. You're being emotional. I am being practical." Her voice was even controlled. Nothing like the woman who had cooked pasta and talked about Frisco at my dinner table 3 weeks ago. A man who starts asking questions about shell companies doesn't stop asking, "You know that, what exactly are you proposing, the Denton site?" He goes out there alone twice a week to check progress. The scaffolding on the north facade has been flagged for inspection twice and hasn't been pulled. A fall from that level, Diana, would be consistent with a site accident. He's 61. Works too hard. Amenise. Under stress. Loses his footing. It happens. The van was completely silent except for the audio coming through the speakers. Ray looked at me. I kept my face still. Gerald said, and Nathan Diana's response took 3 seconds. Nathan is 24, and he idolizes his father. He'll grieve. He'll take over the company with everything structured the way we set it up. He'll have the business. I'll have the liquid assets and the insurance. And by the time he understands the full picture, we'll be somewhere without extradition, filing for a transfer. He won't just accept Nathan trusts me completely. Her voice was flat. He always has. He'll believe whatever I tell him about what happened. He's loyal that way. Ray touched my arm. "That's enough," he said quietly. "We have it?" "1 more minute," I said. They talked for another 4 minutes about logistics, timing, how quickly the insurance payout would process. A real estate contact in Portugal. Then Ray reached for his phone. 12 minutes later, 2 Dallas PD detectives and a fraud investigator from the Texas State Attorney's Office knocked on the door of that unit. Ray had been coordinating with them for a week. The moment Diana mentioned the Denton site and scaffolding, we had what Margaret Osei had called clear and explicit conspiratorial intent. I rode the elevator up with Ray and 2 uniformed officers. Gerald opened the door in his shirt sleeves. Glass in hand. And his face performed calm very well for about 1 second. Then he saw me. "James," he said. "Gerald," I said. Diana was standing near the window. When I stepped into the room, she didn't make a sound. She just looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not guilt. Not fear. Something closer to assessment. The face of someone calculating what move remained. "Diana Caldwell," one of the detectives said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." "To wire fraud?" And forgery. He read her rights while the second detective moved toward Gerald. You have no idea what you've done, Diana said to me. She was absolutely calm. I heard every word. I said, so did the recording equipment. She searched my face. Nathan will never forgive you for this. Maybe, I said, but he'll be alive. That's the only thing I care about right now. They walked her out. Gerald went quietly. As they reached the hallway, he looked back at me and started to say something about his attorneys. I turned away. I stood in that empty condominium for a moment after the door closed and looked out at the Dallas skyline. 26 years. I had given this city everything I had. And I thought I was giving my family the same. A large part of what I thought was my life had been a stage set built around my blind spots. I drove home alone. Nathan called me at 11 that night. I could hear from his voice that someone had already reached him. Diana had made one phone call from processing. Dad. His voice was tight. Mom called me. I know. She says you set her up? She says you've been having her followed for months. That you hired people to fabricate Nathan. Evidence, because you wanted to. Nathan? Stop. I waited. I need you to come home. Not tonight. Whenever you're ready. And I need you to let me show you everything. Silence? She said you would say that. He said finally. I know she did. I kept my voice steady. She knows exactly what to say to you. She has known you your entire life. I'm not going to argue against your mother on the phone at 11 at night. I'm asking you to come home when you're ready and sit with me and look at the evidence. He hung up without answering. The next 6 weeks were the longest of my life. Nathan didn't come home. He visited his mother in detention 3 times in the first 2 weeks. He hired a defense attorney for her. A sharp young litigator out of Fort Worth who immediately began filing motions. I understood. She was his mother. She had raised him. The loyalty was not irrational. What broke it open was something I hadn't orchestrated. Ray told me Nathan had come to his office on a Tuesday afternoon asking to see the evidence. Not asking to understand my side of it. Asking specifically to see the forged documents. Ray showed him the certified forensics report. He showed him the document comparison side by side, my actual signature on 30 authenticated samples versus the signature on the life insurance policy. He showed him the Mesa Point registration, with Diana's maiden name. He showed him the audio recording. Unedited. From Gerald's unit. Nathan sat in that office for 2 hours. Ray said he replayed the section about the Denton scaffolding 4 times. He didn't call me that day or the next. On the 3rd day, a Wednesday, I was at the Denton site when my phone rang. Nathan, I answered. He didn't say anything right away. I waited. The scaffolding, he said. His voice was different, quieter than I had heard it in years. I was the one who flagged it for inspection. Twice. I told Mom it hadn't been pulled yet because we were waiting on the contractor. I didn't speak. She knew about it because I told her. Dad. I told her which site you go to alone. I told her the inspection was delayed. His voice broke on the last word. I didn't know. I didn't. You couldn't have known. I said. I helped her. You told your mother normal things about your father's work schedule. That is not what happened here. What happened here is something she planned for years before you understood any of it. A long silence. She said you were a mark. Nathan said, on that recording, she said you were supposed to be easy. Grieving. Trusting. I thought about my father dying the year before I turned 40. I thought about how lost I had been when Diana came into my life steady and certain and ready with answers. She was right about that part. I said, I defended her. Nathan said, I called you paranoid. I told Emma you were losing it. You protected someone you loved. I said, there's nothing wrong with that. There's everything wrong with it. Come home. I said, he was at the house when I got back from Denton. He was sitting on the front steps the way he used to sit when he was 17 and had something on his mind he didn't know how to say. I parked and walked up and sat beside him. We didn't say much that evening. We ordered food and ate it at the kitchen table and watched a game neither of us was paying attention to. Around 10, he said he was sorry, and I told him there was nothing to be sorry for. Around 11, he went to his old room, which I hadn't changed, and went to sleep. I sat on the back porch for a long time after that. The sky over Colleyville was clear and cold. I thought about what it had cost to get here and what I had left, which was more than I had any right to expect. The trial took 8 months to prepare. Nathan and I walked into the courthouse together on a Tuesday in the following June. Margaret Oze led the prosecution team. The recording from Gerald's unit was entered into evidence on the second day. The jury heard Diana's voice describing the Denton scaffolding in flat practical terms. They heard Gerald asking about Nathan and Diana answering with the same calculation she applied to everything else. The document forensics expert testified for 90 minutes about the forged signature. She was precise and unambiguous. The jury was completely still. On day 4, the financial investigator from the state attorney's office walked the jury through $380,000 in fraudulent vendor payments, the Mesa Point Shell Company, and the insurance policy. He had spreadsheets going back to the first year Diana began structuring the withdrawals. Nathan testified on day 5. He was the hardest witness to watch. He spoke carefully and without theater. He described being told about the Denton scaffolding delays. He described calling Diana and telling her his father visited that site alone twice a week. He looked directly at the jury and said he had not understood at the time what that information would be used for. The defense tried to argue that Diana and Gerald had been engaged in an affair and financial fraud, but had never genuinely intended to act on the conspiratorial language captured in the recording. The jury deliberated for a day and a half. Gerald Marsh received 22 years. Diana received 18. The court also entered a judgment requiring full restitution from the recovered assets of Mesa Point Advisors LLC. I sat in that courtroom and felt no triumph. Only the specific, quiet relief of a man who nearly missed it entirely. 1 year later, Nathan and I were standing on the roof of the new Caldwell Properties headquarters in Frisco. The building had been Nathan's idea, a smaller footprint than I would have chosen, but better designed. He had a gift for knowing what a space could become. He was 25 now, carrying the company forward with the kind of confidence that comes from having been tested and not broken. The gray was starting at his temples, the same way it had started at mine at his age. I want to talk about a formal transition. I said, not yet. 3 or 4 years, but I want to start building toward it now. He looked at me. You sure? You understand this company in ways I didn't, at your age. I said, that's the only credential that matters. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the skyline. She was still my mother. He said. It was something he returned to occasionally, not with blame in it, just with the weight of a fact that didn't resolve cleanly. She was, I said, she loved me. I still believe that part. I think you're right. I said, I think she loved you the way she was capable of loving anyone. That was real. It just wasn't the whole story. He nodded slowly. We went back inside and had coffee at his desk, and went over 2 prospective projects in the northern corridor. Around 6, I drove home and made dinner for myself in a house that was quieter than it used to be and was beginning the paramour. Slowly, to feel like mine again. I am 62 years old. I built this company from a single lot and a determination I inherited from a man who told me the truth was always the most efficient foundation. I almost lost everything to someone who understood that about me and used it as a blueprint for something else entirely. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because I sat in that conference room for 26 years of a marriage and never once asked the hard questions. Not once. I believed what I saw because I wanted to. I trusted the people who said what I needed to hear because it was easier than looking at what they actually did. Trust is not weakness. Blind trust is a different thing entirely. There is a version of me who never went to the bathroom in Gerald Marsh's hallway, who walked out of that conference room that day and drove his wife home and never knew. I think about that version sometimes. He is not here. The one who is here has his son working 2 offices down the hall, and a company that will outlast both of them, and a very clear understanding of the difference between a life and a performance. Pay attention to the small things. The suggestion that comes with a name already attached. The phone put away too quickly. The ease in someone's voice when you agree to something they wanted. Those are not nothing. I wish someone had told me that 30 years ago. If this story reached something in you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've seen this kind of thing up close. Your engagement helps this community reach the people who need it most. Subscribe to MT Sweet Revenge for more stories that might save you from the mistakes I made.